Hi everyone, welcome to Analytics Academy Unplugged. My name is Fontaine Foxworth, and I'm a product manager for analytics at Google. You may also recognize me as the instructor for our new course, Mobile App Analytics Fundamentals. Analytics Academy is Google's online learning platform for courses about digital analytics and measurement. If you're interested in building your skills as an analytics user, this is a great place to begin learning. Our new Mobile App Analytics Fundamentals course is specifically designed for app developers and marketers to learn about the tools Google offers to promote and measure apps. We're excited to have over 30,000 students participating in the course already. Thanks for joining us. Today, we'll be sitting down with a couple of mobile app analytics experts to have a discussion about common analytics questions and challenges that app developers face when trying to measure their apps. I'm excited to welcome Andrew Baldwin, one of our Google software engineers, and Rahul Oak, one of our Google product managers, to join me for our conversation today. So thanks guys for taking the time to chat with me about what's happening in the mobile apps analytics space. So let's dive right into some of the questions that our students submitted at the course. So first up, if I'm a brand new developer to Android and iOS, trying to figure out what's happening here, Rahul, do you have any recommendations for where I get started?
Sure. So you're at the point where you're done building your app, and now you want to think about measurement. You have two options when you think of Google Analytics. You can either go to google-analytics.com to our UI and set up an account, or you can go to admob.com and set up an account on AdMob. What happens behind the covers then is that we set up a Google Analytics account for you and link the two. At this point, regardless of which flow you go through, you get what's called a property ID, and you can use this ID inside your SDKs.
Right. So once you have the Google Analytics property set up and you have your app, you need to make the app talk to the property. So how do you do that? You use the SDK, as Rahul mentioned. And these are really easy to set up, and we have them for both iOS and Android. And you just need to download them and instrument your app with that. Now, once you've done that, the very minimal setup you need is to just send a single page view or a single event. And with that, you get a whole bunch of reporting within GA from just that one hit. You get things like geolocation, so you can see where in the world your users are coming from. You get your active users, so you can look at either your daily, 7 or 14-day or 30-day active users. So you can see when are people coming to my app, using my app, that sort of thing. You get device information, which is ultimately really important when you need to do debugging and see what devices people are actually using and optimize for those devices. Another thing that we actually just launched, which is really cool, is another SDK. Actually, it's a plugin for Unity. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what Unity is, it's this really super cool development environment for building games for a number of different platforms. So Unity supports iOS, Android, Linux, Mac, you name it, and they probably support it. And basically, it allows you to write your game once within the Unity environment and deploy it on all these different systems. So it makes it really easy and really powerful for building games. You only have to write them once, and you get all this cross-platform support almost for free. So we recently launched a plugin for this. And what this allows you to do is basically instrument your game within Unity with GA just once. You don't have to go through all the different platforms. You don't have to export your project to Xcode or to Android Studio and do that measurement. You can do it within Unity, and you get consistent cross-platform tracking for free, basically.
Awesome, that makes a lot of sense. So now I think I've got a good grasp on the tools that I can use to actually implement my app. But what if I want to understand what I should be tracking in my app? Rahul, do you have any tips?
That's a fantastic question, and one that we get from our developers quite a lot, actually, because we have all of these great resources and we have all of these tools that tell you about the mechanics of how to do your measurement. But what you really need is a measurement plan, as we all learn from our Analytics Academy course. So the important part here is, even before you start building something, you need to ask the question, what do I need to measure exactly? And depending on the kind of app you are and depending on the kind of business you're running, the answer to this question may vary significantly. So I would absolutely encourage developers to check out this new mobile app implementation guide, which we recently launched, and we put it together after talking to a bunch of developers and going over best practices from some of our engineers as well. And this is this is a resource which will help answer those questions and come up with a measurement plan. So I would absolutely encourage you to start there.
Awesome, great. So now let's start talking about some of the things we learned in Unit 2, which is really about acquisition of users. So I've heard from talking to a lot of developers that trying to understand where your app installs came from is actually really hard to do on apps as opposed to the web. Rahul, can you help us understand why this is the case?
Sure. A lot of this boils down to the fundamental difference between the way apps and websites work. So on websites, if you see a link, you click on a link and you go to your website, it's just a simple flow. And marketers are pretty familiar with, setting up tracking and setting up campaigns to figure out where their users are coming from. However, in the apps world, the flow changes a little bit. And the main reason for that is marketplaces. So on Android, we have Google Play. On iOS, you have iTunes. So the way the flow works is you see a link, say, to an app somewhere. You click on the link. You're first taken to this marketplace page. You are then prompted to install the app, which you install, and then you go back and open the app. Now, this may not seem like a lot, but this little flow, it changes things significantly. And that's the reason figuring out where your users came from on apps is a little bit trickier than on websites. But as app developers, it's a really, really important question to answer because you want to know where your users are coming from and what campaigns are working and which ones are not.
Awesome, very cool. So I know that Google Analytics has some solutions on this front. So Andrew, can you walk us through kind of how it works for Google Play within Android?
Absolutely. Yeah, so we worked really closely with the Google Play team to develop a GA and Play integration, and it's really simple to set up. You basically just go into the admin interface within GA and link your property to a Google Play app. Once you've done that, there's a small snippet of code that you need to instrument with your app, and after that, you can basically see the flow of users from the Play page through to the installation of the app, through to actually running the app. So you basically get the 3 stages that a user goes through before actually getting into your app. And you can see how those users are progressing and whether or not they're dropping off. Are they visiting your store page and then not installing the app? Are they installing the app and not launching it? Or are they making it all the way through to actually launching the app? Once they've launched the app, the next important question is, okay, is this a quality user? That's another thing that we can answer. And we were able to show you which ad campaigns bring in quality users by connecting them to the revenue that the users are actually producing for your app.
Awesome. So great. Now that we understand Android, I know, Rahul, that you guys recently launched a similar solution for iOS. So can you help us understand kind of what are the pieces of this report for iOS and how can it help marketers and developers?
Glad you brought that up. I'm really, really excited that we launched this only last week. And like I mentioned before, the significant difference in the way tracking works on apps as compared to websites, and by that I mean finding out the source of where your users are coming from, is because of the app stores. Due to certain nuances in the way this works on Google Play versus iTunes, we implemented 2 different solutions. So as Andrew mentioned, the Google Play solution has been out for a while, but now this iTunes solution basically lets you do the same thing. So as an app developer, you get a sense of not only where your users are coming from, but also lets you get an idea of the value of these users. So how much time they're spending in your app, how much money they're spending. And we've partnered with a bunch of different ad networks, including Google's own AdMob, as well as some pretty popular ad networks that developers run campaigns on to help them know where their users are coming from.
Awesome, very cool. So now let's transition to talk about the actual behavior reporting, what's happening inside your app. So something that we talked about in the course itself was the crashes and exceptions reporting. Andrew, can you walk through any best practices that you see around those reports?
Yeah, so hopefully your app isn't crashing too often. But when it does, it's really nice if you can find out about it without your users having to report those problems to you. And that's one of the things that the Google Analytics exception reporting gives you. There's 2 different ways in which you can instrument this. And those are for exceptions which you know about and exceptions which you don't know about. So the first one is for exceptions that you're catching. We have a method in our SDK, which is just send exceptions. You can just send those off to GA. And it's just a 1-line piece of code that you need to put into your app. The other type of exception is the ones that you aren't catching, uncaught exceptions. And those you can actually configure GA in the XML file, the analytics.xml file, to capture all those and send those as well. So now once you've got those exceptions caught and sent to GA, the next thing is to figure out, okay, you need to debug those. So some of them are obvious. You look at the stack trace and it's like, okay, I know where that bug is. I can go fix that really, really easy. Some of them are not so obvious. They might be only occurring on a specific device, or it might be a specific app version that's causing an issue. And those you can actually track down really easily by adding either a segment or a custom dimension to GA and be able to do that analysis and basically break it down and say, oh, this particular device and this particular model is actually causing a problem. Or, you know, this exception started occurring at app version X and now at app version Y, it's no longer occurring, or vice versa, and things like that.
Awesome, cool. Another thing we learned about in the course was screen tracking, how you can track things that are happening on the screen. But also we talked a lot about event tracking and how event tracking in the context of apps is super powerful. So Rahul, will you walk us through some elements around event tracking in apps?
Absolutely. And event tracking is one of those things as well, which differs a lot between apps and websites. On websites, most websites are associated with pages. And apps can flow a little bit differently. You can have your entire app on just one or two screens. And if you want to get a little bit more granular in terms of what users are actually doing inside your app, that's when events come in. So events are, in my mind, I like to think of events as things which the developer tells us are important to them. So for instance, if you're a game app and you want to find out when users are going from level 5 to level 6 inside your app, you do that with an event. If you are a travel app and you want to find out what users are searching for, or once they get their search results, whether they're actually going ahead and booking something or not, you can do that using events. So events are really a way to get granular about your data, about your measurement, and know exactly what users are doing inside your app. So it's a very, very powerful tool.
Awesome. And are there any pitfalls that developers should watch out for when they're tracking events?
Absolutely. And just like pretty much everything else, there is too much of a good thing. So what we've noticed is events are really great. They're really fantastic. But what ends up happening is developers end up sending us too many events. And there's so much noise there that it's hard to separate information from noise. So events are one of those things that are extremely, extremely powerful. But you need to really think about what it is that you want to measure and what it is that you can actually take action on. So for instance, you can pretty much track anything on the screen using events, but do you really care about how many times a certain button was pressed or how many times a user scrolled? Probably not. So the biggest pitfall about events is over-tracking. Try and make sure that you're not sending us things that you necessarily may not have use for.
Awesome, very cool. Another new report that was recently launched is the Active Users Report. And it gives you visibility not just into your 1-day active users, but also your 7, your 14, and even your 30-day active users. So Andrew, can you help us understand what are some of the main elements with these reports and why would you be using these?
Right. So traditionally you might be looking at your users on a daily basis. And you might have an app or game that's used by your users maybe every other day or every few days. And so what you could see is you could see like a spiky behavior in the number of users that are using your app. So the thing that looking at these numbers on a 7 or like a longer time period will sort of smooth out that trend and give you a better visibility into whether or not you're actually gaining users at the rate at which you want to gain users. So are you actually losing users, right? Hopefully not, but it gives you that sort of level of analysis. Now, you can also look at the difference between, say, 7 and 14 or 30 and see, okay, if you see that the 7-day active users are the same as your 1-day active users, you could sort of guess that, okay, maybe everybody's using the app every day. So looking at those differences can sort of give you an idea as to what the retention is of your users and maybe be able to optimize ad campaigns. If all your users are, coming on the weekend, for example, you might want to change how you're advertising and things like that.
Awesome. Very cool. All right, next we're going to transition to talk about the monetization part of the course, which we covered in Unit 4. So there's really been a shift in the industry to this freemium model, where instead of paying to download an app, users are downloading the app for free, and then they can pay to unlock content within the app. So Rahul, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what this means for the industry overall.
Absolutely. So when the App Store started first, we saw that a lot of apps were paid, which meant that you had to pay $1.99, $2.99 to actually download the app. But as we progressed further and further, the developers, I think, realized that that creates a huge barrier to entry in terms of people actually using the app. So as the industry grew smart about these things, a lot of apps started to appear for free. But hey, developers need to eat, right? So you need some way to monetize your app. And so we've started to see this trend of freemium. And I know that a large part of the industry is moving towards freemium, wherein you actually download the app for free, but then you make it such that there's an incentive for the users to upgrade and pay for either a product or a service or some in-app item to make their experience better, to make ads disappear, or whatever it is that you want to incentivize them on. And as I mentioned before, in the industry in general, we are seeing a lot of apps monetize using the freemium model as compared to the pay upfront model.
Awesome. Super interesting. Next, I know that a big differentiator with Google Analytics is the ability to really slice and dice your data super granularly. So Andrew, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you can use these segmentation capabilities to potentially find new monetization opportunities with your app.
Right, so segmentation is super cool, but let's figure out what is that for people that don't know. And basically it's a subset of your data. So for example, if you wanted to look at 25 to 35-year-old males, that's a segment. If you wanted to look at users who are from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, that's also a segment. And basically combining all of this together allows you to do some really powerful analysis on your GA data. So if you wanted to, for example, take a look at the geo reports, and you see that a bunch of your users are coming from a specific country. You may want to create a segment for that country, and now look at the user behavior and see what they're doing throughout your app. Are they spending more money than other users? Are they getting stuck on different things? Are they actually hitting various places in your app where they're having trouble? Is there a language barrier, or things like that? Another interesting thing to look at is creating a segment for people that have actually paid money versus people who have not paid money. So looking at the behavior of these two groups of people can actually lead you to finding some interesting things within your app. In fact, you may actually find, if you have a game, there's an exploit in there that people that aren't paying are using in order to bypass a certain area of your game that other people would have to pay to get past.
Awesome. Kind of talking about this idea of slicing and dicing your data and using segments within Google Analytics, I know that Google Analytics recently launched the ability to actually remarket to users based on these segments by using this concept of audiences and defining groups of your users. So Rahul, can you talk to us about what remarketing means in the mobile app space and what opportunities it unlocks for marketers?
That's a fantastic question, and it actually combines a lot of the things that we have spoken about in this conversation itself. So I'm actually going to use the example of a game. Let's say that you are a game developer and you want to let's just use the same example we used for events, that you are sending us events to track which users are going from level 5 to level 6 of your game, for instance. So what you want to see is people who are at level 5, and let's assume level 5 is a particularly difficult level. And you want to track which of these are actually not making it through to level 6 after a few attempts. So what you can do then as an app developer is you can create a segment of all of these users who've been to level 5 but haven't gotten past level 5 yet. And there's a fantastic monetization opportunity there. Because what can you do? Maybe you can incentivize them to buy some sort of in-app item, which helps them get past level 5 and get through to level 6 a lot easier. And so then using a combination of events, segments, and remarketing, you've done something which really, really increases the probability of you monetizing for that set of users.
Awesome. Well, we covered a lot of content today, so I really want to thank you guys for coming out. I think we really dove in a lot deeper into some of the topics covered in the course. So thanks again for your insights, and I hope that our listeners found it helpful as well. Before we wrap up, I want to share a couple of reminders about our current Analytics Academy course, Mobile App Analytics Fundamentals. It's not too late to register if you haven't started the course yet. The course will be available indefinitely, But keep in mind that if you want to earn a certificate of completion showing that you participated in the course, you'll need to pass all of the course assessments by December 11th at 11:59 Pacific Time. We'll continue to have a community of teaching assistants and analytics experts available to answer your course questions through December 11th. Thanks again for joining us today, and happy learning!